This wasn't supposed to happen. No one planned it, no one designed it, no one even wanted it. It started with a dirty dish, a forgotten experiment, and a scientist who almost threw everything away. This is History by Accident. London, September 1928. The city is loud, crowded, smoky. World War I ended just 10 years ago, and the wounds weren't just emotional. Millions of soldiers had died, not from bullets, not from bombs, from infections, a small cut, a minor wound, and within days, you were dead. Bacteria were invisible killers, and the world had no answer for them. Doctors tried everything: carbolic acid, mercury, amputation. Sometimes the cure was worse than the disease. Surgeons washed their hands, hospitals tried to stay clean, but once bacteria got inside the body, there was almost nothing anyone could do. People died from tooth infections, from strep throat, from a scraped knee that got dirty. The world was desperate for something, anything, that could fight bacteria from the inside. They just didn't know where to find it. Enter Alexander Fleming, a Scottish bacteriologist, working in a small, cluttered lab at St. Mary's Hospital in London. Fleming was brilliant. Everyone knew it, but he was also notoriously messy. His lab was chaos. Petri dishes stacked everywhere, experiments half-finished, notes scribbled on scraps of paper. His colleagues would shake their heads, politely, but Fleming had a gift. He noticed things others didn't, the small details, the strange patterns. He'd been studying bacteria for years, specifically Staphylococcus, the bacteria responsible for infected wounds, boils, and pneumonia. He was trying to find something that could kill them. He hadn't found it yet. In the summer of 1928, Fleming went on vacation. He left his lab. He left his experiments. He left his petri dishes sitting on the bench for weeks. Now, any careful scientist would have cleaned up before leaving, sealed everything properly, stored the samples away. But Fleming, he left them out. When he came back in September, he started sorting through the dishes, checking which ones were still useful, throwing away the contaminated ones, and that's when he saw it. One dish, growing something it shouldn't have been. Mold, green, fuzzy mold, had drifted through the window, landed on his petri dish, and started growing. A contaminated experiment, a ruined sample. Any other scientist would have tossed it in the bin, muttered something under their breath, and moved on. But Fleming stopped, because around the mold, something strange was happening. The bacteria were dead, not just a little suppressed, not just slowed down, dead.
But what does it mean?
A perfect
new
ring of
substance,
nothing
it could
surrounded
change
the
everything.
mold, like a force
That's
field,
funny.
like the mold was killing everything near it. Fleming picked up the dish, held it up to the light, and said something that would become one of the most important sentences in human history. That's funny. That's it. That's all he said. 2 words, but those 2 words changed medicine forever. He didn't throw the dish away. He stared at it. He thought about it.
The mold
He
has
started
killed the
asking
bacteria.
questions.
Fascinating.
What
But
is
does
this
it mean?
mold?
A new substance.
Why is it killing the
could change
bacteria?
everything.
What's it producing? Can we use it? He identified the mold. It was called Penicillium notatum, a common mold, the kind you might find on old bread, on rotting fruit, on a forgotten piece of cheese in the back of your fridge. Totally ordinary. But Fleming discovered it was producing something extraordinary, a substance, a natural chemical, that was lethal to bacteria.
The dish
He
that
called it
changed the world.
penicillin.
Preserved.
He
remembered.
published his findings in 1929, and then almost nothing happened. Here's the part of the story most people don't know. Fleming discovered penicillin, but he couldn't figure out how to make it stable, how to concentrate it, how to turn it into something a doctor could actually use. The mold produced only tiny amounts. The substance broke down quickly. It was nearly impossible to extract in a useful form. Fleming tried. He published. He told people. But no one listened. The medical world shrugged. They were chasing other solutions, other drugs, other methods. Penicillin sat there, in Fleming's notes, in his papers, almost forgotten, for over a decade. Then World War II happened, and everything changed. By 1940, the world was at war again. And again, soldiers were dying from infected wounds. 2 scientists at Oxford, Howard Florey, Ernst Boris Chain, they were desperately searching for something to save soldiers' lives. and one of them stumbled across Fleming's old paper from 1929, 11 years old, gathering dust. They read it, and something clicked. They decided to try what Fleming couldn't, to actually make penicillin into a medicine. It was incredibly difficult. They grew mold in every container they could find. Baths, bedpans, old tin cans, anything that could hold liquid.
We need more.
They extracted the substance, purified it, tested it on mice, on rats, eventually on humans. The first human trial.
I feel
A police officer named Albert Alexander. He had scratched his face on a rose bush. That's all. A thorn, a scratch. But the infection spread to his eye, his scalp, his lungs. He was dying. Slowly, painfully. Doctors had already removed his eye, trying to stop it. He had weeks to live, maybe less. Then Florey and Chain came in with a tiny vial of penicillin. They injected it. Within 24 hours, Albert Alexander started improving. The fever dropped, the swelling went down, he was eating again. It was a miracle. The doctors were stunned. They kept treating him, day after day. But then, they ran out of penicillin. They had so little. They had literally been extracting it from his urine and reusing it. When the supply ran out, the infection came back. Albert Alexander died. But not because penicillin didn't work. It worked. It worked better than anything in history. They just didn't have enough. Florey flew to the United States, convinced American pharmaceutical companies to mass produce it. And they did. By 1944, by D-Day, Allied soldiers had enough penicillin to treat every infected wound on the battlefield. For the first time in human history, soldiers were surviving infections that would have killed them in every previous war.
He would have died from
was
infection
staggering.
in World War I.
In World War I, 2 to 3% of infected wounds were fatal. In World War II, with penicillin, less than 1%. It saved hundreds of thousands of lives in that war alone. But that was just the beginning. After the war, penicillin
is now mass
flooded the
produced.
world,
There is enough.
and
There is
everything
finally
changed.
enough, historic.
Strep throat, once potentially deadly, gone with a course of antibiotics.
It's normal.
Pneumonia, one of the world's
Miraculous.
biggest killers. Treatable. Syphilis, which had devastated civilizations for centuries. Curable within days. Scarlet fever, meningitis, gonorrhea, wound infections, ear infections, conditions that had killed millions for centuries. Suddenly manageable. Suddenly survivable. Childbirth
Here's your beautiful
became safer.
baby, safe and sound.
Surgery became
Oh,
possible
thank you.
in
So
ways it
perfect.
never was before. Because now, you could operate on someone without the near certainty of a fatal infection afterward. The average human life expectancy jumped by years, decades in some parts of the world. More than 200 million lives saved, and counting. All because of mold. All because of a dirty petri dish. All because one man didn't throw it in the bin. In 1945, Fleming, Florey, and Chain shared the Nobel Prize in medicine. Fleming became famous almost overnight. He was knighted, he traveled the world, he was celebrated everywhere he went. But in
Professor
interview
Fleming, how
after
did you
interview,
realize the
he
potential?
was remarkably humble about it.
began with a
He kept
simple
saying the same
observation.
thing. I did not invent
I did not
penicillin.
invent penicillin.
Nature did.
Nature did.
I only noticed it. And that's the thing. That's the whole thing. He noticed it. That's all it took. That's all it ever takes. Because the
A
mold
reminder that
had
this
always
life-saving
been there.
organism was always present,
Penicillium
always
notatum
ordinary,
was
always
everywhere.
overlooked,
On
still
old
there.
bread, on fruit, on surfaces all around the world. It had been killing bacteria for millions of years before Fleming was born. People just weren't paying attention. Now here's the part that should stop you cold. Fleming almost didn't notice it either. He was about to throw the dish away. He was sorting through contaminated experiments, getting rid of failures. If he had just been slightly less curious that morning, if he had been running late, if he had been distracted, if he had simply dropped the dish into the discard pile without looking, 200 million people might not have lived. Let that sit for a moment. 200 million lives, hanging on whether a tired scientist looked twice at a dirty dish. And here's another layer. The mold shouldn't have been there in the first place. London that summer had an unusual cold snap. The temperature dropped just enough for the mold to grow, for it to spread. A week earlier or later, a few degrees warmer, and the mold wouldn't have grown, or it would have grown too fast, And Fleming might not have seen the pattern. The timing had to be almost exactly perfect. And it was. By accident. This is what history actually looks like. Not a straight line. Not a brilliant plan executed perfectly. A messy lab. A forgotten vacation. A contaminated dish. An open window. A cold snap. And a man who stopped when everyone else would have kept walking. Penicillin wasn't designed. It was discovered by mistake. And then almost missed. And then ignored for a decade. And then saved by a war. And then shared with the world by men who didn't invent it. It took everything to align perfectly. And somehow, it did. Think about the other accidents on the list. The microwave, born from a melted chocolate bar. Insulin, discovered when a scientist noticed dead dogs were living longer. The smallpox vaccine, found by a country doctor who noticed milkmaids didn't get sick. Safety glass, created when a French chemist dropped a flask and it didn't shatter. Anesthesia, stumbled upon at a laughing gas party.
Why?
The list of accidental medical breakthroughs alone could fill a library. We don't like to admit this. We like to think science is clean, controlled, intentional. We like the idea of a genius sitting down with a plan, working methodically, achieving exactly what they set out to achieve. But that's not how it happens. Not most of the time. Most of the time, it happens like this. Someone goes on vacation, leaves their dishes out, comes back, and notices something weird in the mess. So what's the real lesson? It's not just that accidents lead to breakthroughs. That's true, but it's not enough. The real lesson is about what happens after the accident. The mold was there. The penicillin was there. Before Fleming. During Fleming. After Fleming would have been if he'd just thrown the dish away. The substance existed. The bacteria-killing power existed. What didn't exist was someone willing to stop, to look, to ask why, to refuse to dismiss the strange thing in front of them. That's the rarest ingredient. Curiosity, not the invention. The inventor's willingness to care about something that looked like nothing. Fleming died in 1955. He lived long enough to see penicillin change the world, long enough to know what his accidental discovery had done. He gave speeches, he received honors, he shook hands with presidents and kings. But reportedly, what he valued most were the letters, thousands of them, from ordinary people all over the world. Mothers who wrote, "My child would be dead without it." Soldiers who wrote, "I came home because of you." People who had survived infections that would have been death sentences just 20 years earlier. He kept those letters because he understood something about accidents. They don't feel significant when they happen. A melted chocolate bar, a moldy dish, a glow you can't explain, a burr stuck to your dog. They feel like nothing, like annoyances, like failures. But inside them, sometimes,
Professor Fleming, how did
is something
you
that
realize the
changes
potential?
everything.
It began
You've
with
used
a simple
antibiotics,
observation.
almost certainly, in your lifetime. Maybe for strep throat, maybe for an ear infection, maybe for something more serious. Maybe antibiotics saved your life. Maybe they saved someone you love. And somewhere back at the beginning of that chain, there's a cluttered lab in London, a messy scientist on vacation, an open window on a cold summer day, and a petri dish that probably should have been thrown away. That's where it started. That's where 200 million lives were born. In an accident, in a mess, in a moment no one planned. So the next time your experiment fails, the next time your plan falls apart, the next time something goes wrong in a way that makes no sense, don't just clean it up. Don't just move on. Look at it. Really look. Ask why. Ask, what is this? Ask, what if there's something here I'm not seeing? Because the mold was always there. The question is whether you're the kind of person who sees it. History isn't made by people who never fail. It's made by people who fail. And look closely at what they've broken. Subscribe to History by Accident and tell me in the comments, what do you think the next great accidental discovery will be? Is it already sitting somewhere right now? In a lab? In a kitchen? In a mistake no one's looked at twice? Let me know. And I'll see you in the next one, where we find another moment that wasn't supposed to happen, but saved the world anyway.